As we move on to Chapter 12, Section 5, we're going to talk about samples and surveys. And this is kind of an interesting little survey that's here at the top. It says, the manager of a Thai restaurant wants to know how often people in her city eat Thai food. She surveys 200 of her customers. The manager says that the results in the histogram show that most people in the city eat Thai food at least 10 times per year. So here it is, at least 10 times. See the arc, how it goes up there? Do you think there were any problems with this survey? Well, by the way, if you hear any background noise, it's just my animals. What do you think the problem with this particular survey is? Is there any bias, maybe? Well, how about the fact that she's just asking her customers? I mean, couldn't that be a fairly, I'm hoping, maybe an obvious bias? As well, okay, your customers, yeah, they're going to eat Thai food, but she's not really showing the rest of the population's opinions, the rest of the city. So as we move on, we're going to talk about some limitations. We're going to talk about different ideas when we do samples and surveys. So we've done a lot of analyzing numbers. Now we're going to talk about making sure that samples and surveys are appropriate and putting some words to these things. All right, there are two types of data. There's quantitative and there's qualitative. You've probably heard the phrase, you know, it's the quality, not the quantity that matters. Quantity has something that can be measured, and it can be almost arranged numerically. For example, age, weight, and time. These are all something that can go in order. You can have a higher one, a lower than one. You could say, you know, I'm older than you are, it took me longer than it took you, so on and so forth. And then there's qualitative. Qualitative, it describes a category and cannot be measured or numerically compared. For example, if you take a survey and you say, how many students have brown hair? How many students have red hair? That can't be really numerically measured. You know, attitude, are you optimistic or pessimistic? You know, you can't really measure that. Now, some people will argue that the zip code, why isn't this one quantitative? Well, the reason the zip code isn't quantitative, you would never say something like, well, my zip code's bigger than your zip code, or anything like that. It's not something that you put in order. It's more of a category. Okay, so don't think that a zip code is a quantitative just because it's a number. Let's go through and classify some data. Problem 1. Are they qualitative or quantitative? Favorite movies. What do you think favorite movies would be? Well, we can't really measure them, so that would be qualitative. All right, part B. The number of students in different schools who take Spanish. Well, since we're talking about the number of students, you would arrange the number of students. That's quantitative. Then football jersey numbers. Now, it's not necessarily like you line people up for any particular reason. You don't say, oh, my number's higher than your number. It doesn't really matter. You know, a quarterback can be 7, a quarterback can be 10. It doesn't necessarily determine who you are. Yeah, I know they have different numbers for different types of players, but you never really arrange a football team by their number, so that's going to be qualitative. All right, moving on. We've got the got it. It asks you about the costs of CDs. Now, the cost of CDs might be something worth actually going through and ordering. So we're going to say that one is quantitative. All right, next little chart. There are different types of surveys that you can do. For example, a random survey. We'll survey a population at random. You know, the age, the size, nothing matters about that particular population. United States, China, whatever. There's no real, it's just randomly picked. An example, survey people whose names are drawn out of a hat. That's very, you know, it's just very random. You don't have a lot of stuff happening or being particular. Okay, systematic. Systematic is when you select a number n at random and then you survey every nth person. So example, you select the number 5 at random and therefore you survey every 5th person. Last is stratified. That's when you're going to take a population, you're going to split it into smaller groups, and each group is going to have a particular characteristic. Okay, so we've got smaller groups, certain characteristics. Those are important words. Then you survey randomly within the groups. For example, if you separate a high school into 4 groups by grade level, so we've separated them, and then now you survey random samples of students in those grades. The next idea we're going to talk about are the types of sets of data. Okay, so these two are the types of sets of data. You can have a univariate, which is a set of data that uses one variable. So, and that you can use that word to your advantage. Una, like a unicycle, is one variable. A bivariate is where you have a set of data. Those are called ditto marks. They mean the same thing above. Set of data that uses 2 variables. So as we move on, we're going to take our vocab up here and our vocab down here and apply it. Part A. Which of the two is it? Univariate or bivariate? The atomic weights of the elements in the periodic table. The atomic weights. Well, the only thing you're dealing with is the weights, so that's univariate. Problem 2. The edge lengths and volumes. See that word and? We're doing lengths and volumes. That's bivariate. Okay, moving on. The got it is the data set heights and weights. Heights and weights. Do you see how we have that keyword heights and weights? That's bivariate. Why? Because we have 2 variables. Okay, problem 3, choosing a sample. You want to find out how many DVDs students at your school rent in a month. You interview every 10th teenager you see at the mall. What sampling method are you using? Well, let's think. Are we breaking it into groups at all? Do we care about their age, boys, girls? We don't have any groups, so that's not important. But we do see that it's going to be every 10th member, right? Or every 10th teenager that you see. That is called systematic. The reason that is systematic is because it is going by every 10th. And if you want to look back behind, is see how it says you select a number at random and then you survey that particular number. Okay, now do you think that this is good or do you think that this is a bad way of sampling? Well, you do want to talk about, if you read the problem, it says you want to find out how many DVDs students at your school rent. So why are you going to the mall? So we can kind of see a contradiction here, that it's bad that you're going to the mall and you're going to use that data for your high school. Maybe it would have been better to stay in your high school. Now, is there anything good about it? Are they doing anything right? Yeah, they are doing one thing right. They're interviewing teenagers. So, it's good and it's bad. They're interviewing teenagers, that's good, but it's really not that great of a survey because they're going to the mall for something that represents your high school. But got it. You want to find out how many DVDs students at your school rent in a month. You interview all students leaving a school assembly who are wearing school colors. Will this plan give you a good sample? Explain. Well, first of all, we need to talk about what kind of survey this is. Now, if we read through, we can see that we are particular about the types of students that we're picking. We want students who are wearing school colors. That has a strategy to it. This is a stratified survey. You have a strategy behind it. Now, do you think this is good or not? Well, you're selecting a particular group of people. Now, what do you think? Do the people in your school, the kids who wear school colors and they're really, school spirited, do you think that represents everyone in your school? Not very well, does it? So I'm going to write no. I don't think this is a good one because you were being a little biased. You're being biased based on the fact they're only interviewing people who wear school colors. That group could be, that particular group could be biased. The group could be biased. And if you think about that, think about your friends. Think about Southside. Think about the kids who wear the school colors. Think about the kids who don't. Do you think that they always have, are school spirited students, are they the same as the students who maybe don't like Southside a lot? Probably not. So you need to be careful that when you select people, you select a good representation of what you're trying to find. Problem 4. A reporter wants to find out what kinds of movies are most popular with local residents. So our goal is to figure out local residents. The reporter asks the question, do you prefer exciting action movies or boring documentaries? Is this question biased? Explain. Well, let's examine the question a little bit more. Do you prefer exciting action or boring documentaries? You see those adjectives or gerunds or whatever they're called that are describing the types of movies? Okay? These exciting and boring, those are descriptions. So it's almost like the reporter gives his opinion. Now, if you're going to give your opinion when you report something, you're going to make that question biased. If you've ever noticed on the news, when people give a report, the news anchors, they don't sit there and they say, and they don't give their opinion, say like, well, I don't believe in this, but this is what happened. They just give the news, you just ask the question. So since the reporter is giving the opinion in the question, it is biased. Moving on. A reporter wants to find out what kind of movies are most popular with the local residents. The reporter realizes the question, do you prefer exciting action movies or boring documentaries, is too biased. How can the question be reworded so that it is not biased? Why don't you take a moment, pause the video, and try to reword the question yourself. Okay, hopefully your question has no descriptive words in it, and you just ask them, do you prefer action movies? Look how we're taking that descriptive word out. Or documentaries. So if you were to conduct a survey, you need to make sure that your question is appropriate without any bias in it. Problem 5. You want to determine what % of teens age 14 to 18 watch wrestling on TV. At a high school wrestling match, you ask every third teenager whether he or she watches wrestling on TV. How might this cause bias in the results of your survey? Well, let's think what your survey is about. The survey is about, and it's all teens. It doesn't say a specific group of teens. The survey is about all teens 14 to 18. But think about who you're asking. You are only asking teens who are at a wrestling match right now. So are you being biased? Absolutely you're being biased because they like wrestling. Or either that or their mom or dad drug them there, or the brother and sister does. So yeah, they're probably going to have to watch it at home. So yes, this is biased. And it's because they're at a wrestling tournament already. Okay, let's try one more time. You want to know how many of your classmates have cell phones. To determine this, you send every classmate an email asking, do you own a cell phone? How might this method of gathering data affect the results of your survey? So maybe this one's a little more difficult. If they have email, so if you are sending an email only, how could that affect the people who have cell phones? Well, if you're emailing them, maybe they have a lot of technology. So you want to make sure that you don't just send an email, because that's really just going to hit the people who have the technology. You want to hit all people. So since you're sending the email, you're making a bias of the people who might already have technology. So it's more likely maybe that they have a cell phone. So if and when you ever get to stats class with Mr. Lebetter, you're going to be doing a lot of surveying, and you've got to make sure that you're not biased in your questions, you're not biased in the group of people that you ask, and that if you choose to break your survey into groups, that you're doing it appropriately based on the question that you're asking.